welcome to the nullcon webinar series. My name is Harshit. I'm a part of nullcon team. We have been running nullcon security conference since 2010, where cybersecurity is discussed in detail among the industry, government, and tech community. This pandemic has given us the opportunity to continue to share knowledge and connect with our global community by running online events like webinars, training, and resume clinic. Today is our inaugural session of nullcon CXO panel series, where thought leaders will share their experience and learning with the community on the topic of critical steps involved in protecting the large-scale infrastructure. I'm pleased to introduce and invite our today's panelists, Mr. Eric Eifert, Senior VP Managed Security Services at Digital 14. He is our moderator. And to join the panel, we have Ms. Eman Awadhi, Vice President, Cybersecurity and Resiliency at Expo Dubai 2020. And along with Mr. Manish Tiwari, Senior VP and CISO at Bharti Airtel, who has been attending nullcon since his Indian Navy days. On behalf of nullcon team, I welcome you all. For the audience, we will be recording this session and later uploading it on our YouTube channel for future watch. If you have any questions, please send them across via the Zoom chat and they will be answered by the speaker after the panel session. So without any further delay, I request Mr. Eric, our moderator, to take the charge of the session. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Good day, everybody. My name is Eric Eifert, and I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to participate in what I think is a very exciting panel around protecting large-scale infrastructures. We as cybersecurity professionals live in very interesting times. The threat landscape and the threat actors continue to evolve. We're seeing a very interesting type of attack happening across the board, whether it's phishing attacks, whether it's data breaches, whether it's targeting actual infrastructure. So we see the threat landscape continually evolving, which makes it challenging for us and exciting for us. We also see the IT environments changing. So we're no longer responsible for dealing with just your traditional IT environments. We now have cloud environments, a variety of cloud environments. We have a very mobile workforce, especially with the COVID situation. We see a lot of work from home, a lot of mobile applications, mobile devices needing to be factored into the overall environment. We're seeing the introduction of basically Internet of Things and everything being connected to the internet. And in some cases, we also see a convergence with the industrial control system or operational technology space. We're also seeing some very interesting innovations in technology itself. So we're seeing machine learning really come into the environment. We're seeing big data analytics. We're seeing virtualization, containerization, things migrating to the cloud. And so it really makes it for a challenging environment for cybersecurity professionals. Managing just a few of these is challenging of itself, much less when we expand that to a smart city or a military entity or a global company. So we're fortunate to be joined by two very experienced experts within the region that are dealing with these on a daily basis. So I once again want to reintroduce Eman, who is the Vice President out at Expo Dubai 2020, responsible for cybersecurity and cyber resilience. Previously, she also worked with AE-CERT, which is the national cert for the country, as well as one of the two telecoms within the country, do telecommunications. Joining her as Manish, who is not only the Vice President and CISO for Bharti Airtel, but also he's a retired commander and the Director of the Indian Navy CERT. So not only their current roles, but also their previous roles are very important to this discussion, as it gives them a unique experience and a long history of working with these challenging times. So I wanted to start off by allowing each of them some time to kind of frame the challenge that they see and kind of some of their experiences. So I'd like to start with Eman to kind of give us her perspective on what she's seen with Dubai 2020, which is really building a brand new smart city in Dubai to host the 2020 Expo, now 2021 Expo, as well as some of her previous experience. So Eman, I'd like to hand over to you to kind of give us your perspectives on dealing with some of these massive infrastructures that we're seeing today.
Yep. Thank you, Eric. Pleasure to be with everyone here today. I'll give a brief about Expo so everyone could understand what is a World Expo. So World Expo is a festival of innovation, imagination, celebrating the culture. And it's also a meeting point for people, business, and government. World Expo takes place every 5 years, and it will be in Dubai for the first time in Middle East, Africa, and South Asia. It was supposed to be taking place in October this year, but unfortunately, due to the pandemic, it's been shifted to 1st of October 2021 until 31st of March 2022. So it's going to be over a period of 6 months. Our theme is Connecting Mind, Creating the Future. We will be welcoming 190 participating countries. Expectation is 25 million visits, 70% from outside the UAE, and the plan is to host 60 events per day. So, if we talk about Expo Dubai 2020, as Eric mentioned, it's a smart city within a city. So we're talking about the site, which is 4.38 square kilometer. We have over 200 buildings, including the self-built pavilions. To give you also an example of the magnitude of the site, we will be placing around 8,000 Wi-Fi access points along with our network partner, Cisco, which will be serving up to 250 users per day during an Expo event. So this gives you a little bit of magnitude of how would the Expo site be. So Expo, we started everything from scratch. So it was a green field. So one of the main challenges, I would say, having such a large infrastructure and including this, all of these buildings, we have multiple contractors on site, each with their own selection of IoT devices. So these were one of the challenges of how we're going to be able to bridge the gap between this IT and OT, and also the regulations and the governance. Of course, building such a site and implementing and operating such a site, we need an army of resources. So we cannot do it alone. So this is why, like any other mega event, we leverage on partnerships in order to utilize the skill sets the partners have, whether the partners have previous experience in other mega events as well. When we were planning and designing for Expo, we weren't looking at the technologies that were available back in 2018 or 17 or 19. We were looking at the technologies that would be available in 2020. So Expo is all about innovation and showcasing the newest technology. So the challenge for us is how we're going to be able to, first of all, understand these security risks for these new solutions that are there in the market. How we're going to be able, whether we have enough time in order to assess the security of these solutions, and we're going to be able to tighten the security controls for these systems as well, and how would the integration work across the infrastructure from application to hosting to network and security as well.
Thank you, Eman. Appreciate that. Manish, please give us kind of your insights being a part of a global company, as well as some of your time as the director of the CERT for the Navy in India. Two very different organizations, but there's probably some similarities in the type of infrastructure that you guys had to deal with or have to deal with. So please give us some of your insights into that.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be part of this panel and this discussion today. So very briefly and very objectively, one of the critical differences coming from the armed forces into the corporate sector is that in the armed forces, there is no commercial attribute to the information that you protect. Information once lost, God forbid, is lost forever. So, these are national, this is information, protection of information systems and data is of national interest. Secondly, the other thing that I would like to point out is that most modern armed forces now are highly network centric. They depend upon data exchange and communications. And increasingly, all the systems which basically are there in the armed forces are using a combination of new generation as well as traditional methodologies of connecting in a secure manner to communicate with each other for better command and control. So, the first and foremost thing is that how do you ensure that your system, your communication systems stay safe? You have absolute control of your communication systems, and that you ensure that even in the worst possible situation, your communication systems do not go down. Because for any modern armed force, if your communication systems were to fail, then that's it. That's the end of you. And the second, of course, is that you have to protect the data which flows. So as they say, security of data in 3 states: security of data at rest, in transit, and while it's being processed. But the critical difference here is that in the armed forces, you can't give a commercial attribute to data. It is absolutely priceless, and if it leaks, it's gone forever. In the commercial world, there is a commercial or a regulatory connotation to everything that you do. And there are companies which do end up having incidents at times, but it has a financial impact, but they recover from that. So I think that is one of the key differences in the corporate sector, is that there is a lot of business considerations that actually go, business considerations, regulatory considerations, and obviously considerations for the protection of your customers whose data you hold within your ecosystem. So I think these are largely the differences between the two environments. The other critical difference that I actually see is that in the armed forces, things are a little bit more slow moving, because systems are very complicated. They take much more time to develop and to deploy, to commission, to deploy. And the exploitation for those systems is a little longer. So you will traditionally find information systems in the armed forces which are still running on platforms which have been discarded in the outside world, and it becomes a challenge to protect that. In the commercial world, things are a little bit more fast moving. Your refresh of technology is much faster, because you have to stay ahead of the competition. So it's more dynamic, it's more agile, it's more fast moving, it's less complicated, if I may say, as compared to the new generation weapon systems which are coming. So the pace of technology refresh outside is much faster. Now, I represent a sector which is one of the most regulated world over. If you see telecommunications, it's part of the critical information infrastructure of any country. And as far as Airtel is concerned, it is one of the largest telecom companies in the world. It's one of the largest telecom companies in India. And we also run a payments bank, which is a separate entity, but the whole IT infrastructure and the security operations for the Airtel Payments Bank is basically being done by Bharti Airtel, which is the group parent company. And what you have to realize is the complexity. So the two most regulated sectors in any country would be the telecom sector and the banking sector. And what we do out here is we run infrastructure which has to basically undergo scrutiny, not only by the Central Bank of India, but also by the Department of Telecom, we being a telecommunication service provider. So having said that, the other thing that is really very rapidly evolving is that the traditional world of telecommunications and IT engineering or information systems is experiencing something what we refer to as the true convergence. So convergence in the telecommunication field has been a little slower as compared to convergence, the phenomenon of convergence experienced otherwise. And this has accelerated, particularly with the advent of 4G. And 5G will just simply take it to the next level. The prevalence of information systems and the overlapping of technologies will be absolutely seamless. And there would be a lot of virtualization used for basic platforms to drive and put together 5G technology, as I'm sure everybody is aware. So a lot of use of virtualization and cloud technologies and information technologies, not only in 4G, but also more importantly in 5G. So I'll just give you a small example. If you were to set up a security operations center for a pure IT environment, it's far more mature. The use cases around that are far more mature and more traditional. I mean, there's almost close to 20 years of industry development behind that. But if you were to tomorrow set up a security operations center with a SIM tool, if I'm using an SIEM tool, which has a clear focus on a telecom network, that is still evolving. So, there is a huge gap between the maturity levels of what you could define is a SIM-based security operations center for a telecom network, as compared to a pure information system kind of an environment. But apart from that, I think last 7-8 months have been the real game changer. The whole world has absolutely turned 180 degrees around and continues to do so. And the crisis is still not over. I don't think even the Spanish flu of 1918 was anywhere close to what we are experiencing today, because unlike 102 years back, when the Spanish flu pandemic, went around like wildfire and killed millions of people around the world, today the world is a much smaller place, and it's far more interconnected. It's more heterogeneous, and I actually feel that if had it not been for information systems, had it not been for IT, which has actually helped the world to stay connected in the worst stage of the COVID-19 crisis, to help businesses, survive, in some cases even thrive, to reinvent themselves. That this is truly the power of information technology, but it has come with its own set of challenges. And I'm sure.
No, I appreciate that. That's actually a good segue around the pandemic, and I'd like to get Eman's perspective on how, with Expo 2020, building a smart city where you had a ton of resources on site dealing with all these different information systems, OT systems, IoT systems, how has the global pandemic affected how you are able to protect all those different environments when 6 months ago you had a bunch of people at the Expo site dealing with this?
Yes, especially that we were at a very critical timeline in March, where we were only a few months away from the opening in October. So since, as I said, it was a green field, we were actually building everything from scratch. I would say the pandemic was a blessing for us as a technology and security, because we were able to expedite the implementation of many security solutions and enforce the security controls because of the whole pandemic, because of shifting people to working from home. So that was a blessing for us from that perspective. But I would say the first couple of weeks were very challenging for the team, especially how we're going to be able to continue with the implementation. We have a site that we need to continue on the infrastructure timelines, network, and etc., and how we're going to be able to operate remotely. And on the other side, you have the end user, especially the end user awareness and knowledge. So that was a bit challenging as well, how we were able to manage all of this together. I think it was more of us getting used to the norm and how we're going to be able to take care of all of this, because the technology was there. I mean, working from home, all of these solutions, whether it's Zoom, Cisco WebEx, Microsoft Teams, all of these solutions were available already, but no one was actually using it. The additional thing that we paid attention to is, since everyone's working at home, you have the risk of internal threat of people trying to information leak. So this was something that we had to tighten the controls over what could be access in terms of accessing the infrastructure and data, and especially that we also have a lot of partners on ground. So what type of access we're going to provide to these partners, how we're going to be able to perform the task required, but not jeopardizing the timeline as well.
Excellent. And Manish, from your perspective with Airtel, did you have similar challenges, or were they different because you were kind of a more established telecommunications company? With the pandemic, did you have a similar situation where the workforce now is from home, and you had to scramble to get things in place, or you already had existing things in place that made it easier to implement?
No, actually, I would say that we had it a little easier than Eman because she had a green field. So I really appreciate, because when you have to do something from scratch, right? It's a huge challenge. The advantage that we had is that we anticipated this problem a couple of months in advance. We could actually see it coming. What really helped was that because of the tight regulatory compliance environment in which we work in, in any case, I keep undergoing a huge amount of audits all the time. We have a fairly mature ecosystem, Eric. So I'd like to share this with everybody that in a span of just about 1 week, we shifted 55,000 people to work from home. 55,000 people to work from home in a span of less than 1 week, and using a combination of VPN and VDI. Yes, we had to increase the capacity of our VPN infrastructure because we run our own cloud. We are one of the largest cloud data center providers, and we are actually the largest data center provider in the country. So we have everything running our own cloud. We had to increase the capacity. We had to increase the capacity of inbound connections, the bandwidth, the throughput by almost 6 times. We had to do this all in a span as fast as possible, because telecommunications, when the entire world came to a standstill, there were primarily, apart from critical agencies in the government, there were two organizations which still had to work all the time, 24/7. Healthcare industry, the healthcare sector, and the telecommunication sector. So even at the height of the strictest lockdown, our field engineers were on the ground, and where possible, we had to have our technical people monitoring networks from the safety of their homes. The challenge this presented was that we had to, in the shortest possible time, rejig the architecture of our network, because there are a lot of sensitive applications which traditionally, whether in banking, whether in telecom, or whether in any other company, you do not really allow access to those applications from home. You have to be within the confines of some applications, not necessarily, but the critical applications, you set a rule that, hey, these applications have to be accessed only from a NOC or a SOC or from a critical location. And in this case, all such jobs which could be done remotely had to be done remotely. So we had to enable the access to such critical applications in the shortest possible time. We had to actually reclassify applications, whether allow access through a VPN or a VDI. So we did all that. A certain amount of homework had already started, Eric. But frankly speaking, when it still came as a surprise because of the time period. But yes, another thing that we really had to strengthen, we had to make more use cases. When it came to monitoring, we also had to, monitoring the potential for credential misuse or credential theft. We had to do that. We had to strengthen. Whilst our, as I say, identity access management is very, very important. It's one of the fundamental, foundations of any robust security risk management strategies for a company. And yet, identity and access management is generally a mess you would find in most of the organizations. Whilst we have a robust identity access management, and we have multi-factor authentication with privileged identity management or a role-based access, I will share this, that we had to relook at that entire thing to basically, where possible, where needed, we had to make it more robust, because finally we are dealing with a major telecommunication provider in the country. And so we had to look at so for any critical organization, the whole process of risk management, Eric, is about finding the right balance between business continuity, ease of business, and security. And it's a perennial exercise. And the challenge is always how to find the right balance, because security without business is useless, and business without security is absolutely catastrophic. So we had
that makes sense.
Yes, so we had to, in the shortest possible time on a war footing, we had to do a complete risk assessment exercise all over again. And all I'll say is that we found the right balance between the two from a pandemic and a BCP perspective. So there are places where we had to obviously, sort of lessen, but in a lot of other places we had to put compensating controls, probably additional technologies, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that is what
Right.
I
Appreciate that. No, thank you.
The first 10 days were horribly tough. Yeah.
It was busy for all of us, that's for sure. So I'd like to kind of expand this. So Eman, you mentioned that you're dealing with a variety of non-traditional IT environments, whether it's IoT, wireless, operational technologies. So how do you get visibility to apply the appropriate security use cases into those environments that are not traditional IT? Like Manish mentioned, that we've been doing that for 20 years. So that's a little bit easier. But now you have some of these non-traditional environments. How do you gain that enterprise situational awareness and visibility into some of these non-IT environments?
So first of all, from a process perspective, we have a well-defined process for asset identification, whether onboarding and offboarding of asset. And using the next generation SOC monitor and attain visibility for on-prem cloud assets. This ensures that we are aware of every single VM, network component, container, Docker, Kubernetes components, which is a spin-off of on-prem or on the cloud across the globe. So the technologies that we used in our next generation SOC enabled us to have a better visibility over all of these, also the non-traditional components.
Excellent, thank you very much. And when we look at kind of a global company like Airtel, Manish, how do you kind of handle the infrastructures that are either in other countries, either from a regulatory environment, if you have various clouds in different countries, how as a CISO of an enterprise global company like that, how do you do things that are outside of India in other countries?
Yeah, good question. So we are predominantly operating as a, out of Africa. And till recently, till about a year back, Africa was not a separate entity, but now it has been carved out as a separate entity, Eric. And we have appointed a separate CISO for Africa. So Africa now, whilst earlier I was looking after the complete Africa operations as well, now it's been carved out as a separate entity, and we have appointed a CISO. Having said that, Africa is, Airtel Africa is operating out of multiple countries, and each country has its own regulatory, requirement, mandatory requirements. So one is, of course, to have a very, very strong regulatory team. So one thing that you will find in all telecom companies is a separate regulatory vertical, which works very closely with the legal department to ensure that all regulatory requirements, legal and regulatory requirements, are well understood and complied with, because these are actually part of your licensing conditions. So if you are not compliant with the regulatory framework of a particular country, then Eric, you won't, you won't get a telecom license in the first place. So this is not so much of a post facto, but rather that when you setting up a telecom in a country, you have to be compliant, otherwise you won't get your telecom license. But once you start operating, then what you have to basically put are processes and a framework in place to ensure that you whilst you expand, whilst you transform, you continue to stay absolutely in compliance with the laws of the land and the regulatory framework, because every company is very rapidly evolving. That happens through a mixture of internal audits, statutory audits, as well as regulatory audits, which are done. And of course, Compliance, again, is no guarantee that you will not face a cybersecurity incident. So compliance is one part, but this whole process of vulnerability management is a 24/7 cycle, and that's how we basically look at managing compliance, regulatory, legal, and technical, as well as IT risk management in all these countries. And it's not just Africa. We are also basically handling Airtel Sri Lanka. So Airtel is one of the service providers in Sri Lanka as well. Yeah.
And so to kind of tie into that, from a security operations center design standpoint, do you have a centralized SOC, or do you have a distributed SOC based on geographic region that somehow works interoperability with each other?
So, because of the complexity of Africa, we have, and the fact that Africa has become a separate entity now, there is the complete security operations for Africa are now carved out. There is another dedicated security operations for Pan-Africa. But apart from that, Bharti Airtel, we run security operations for the Airtel Payments Bank, for Bharti Airtel India, as well as for Airtel Sri Lanka. And that's how it is done. And
Okay.
as far as transformation is concerned, we have been applying a lot of new generation technologies, and we have a very high level of automation in our security operations, from detection to incident response.
Great. And Eman, similar question to you, given that Expo 2020 is a smart city with, you mentioned applications, various cloud environments, IoT, OT, how do you look at designing, or how did you design your security operations center to factor in all those different unique environments that are a part of a smart city?
So we've implemented the next generation SOC includes security event monitoring, threat intelligence, deception, security incident detection, prevention, vulnerability management, and etc. So our objective was to identify the incidents and contain early in the kill chain. So our SOC is based on big data analytics, which collects and correlates logs from on-prem and cloud infrastructure in near real time. All of this works in cognizance with the advanced threat intel from the various sources, including the dark web as well. To add on top of that, also our deception platform works on the fundamental of placing a network, user, service account, social media, infrastructure decoys, which helps us identify the attacks early and also understand the behavior of the ATP and the attacker and their payloads.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think deception technology is one of those, honeypot's been around for a long time, but now it's really evolved to a more proactive detection capability. So I think that's fantastic that you've implemented some of those more advanced technologies. And you also mentioned kind of vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, a part of that ecosystem. So I'm curious, from your perspective, how often do you test the infrastructure? Are you looking for specific things across the different infrastructures, and really how frequently do you perform these vulnerability assessments and pen tests across the disparate infrastructures?
Okay, so we have two approaches in this perspective. So first of all, we conduct tabletop exercises, blue team and red team, along with something called technical rehearsal, as if it's a day in Expo. So a day in Expo means you have the top, which is the technology operation center, where you have your standard IT and application and hosting team. You have the NOC and you have the SOC as well. So you have duty managers, and we simulate different scenarios. For example, so the duty managers, they're not going to be aware of what are these scenarios. The scenarios that we've simulated is like DDoS, web defacement. At the same time, there is another incident. For example, accreditation system is down, or ticketing system is down. We pulled some of the cables and some of the data centers to see how would the team react, whether the NOC, the SOC, and the TOC would communicate with each other, how they're going to be able to identify the issue, resolve it, and the communication and escalation as well. So this is one of the things that we do. On top of that, also we have the regular technical assessment cycle that we conduct. With every major change that we have, it goes into the assessment cycle, whether we do vulnerability management, penetration testing, or source code review, along with the annual tests that we have. The advantage with being a greenfield is a lot of system and application implementation. We're breaking down into different work packages. So you would find that most of the system and the applications went into through a lot of iteration of assessments within a short interval of time due to the different work package implementation that was going through as well. And also on top of that, since we have a lot of vendors on board as well, we added a prerequisite, which was based on we've noticed that a lot of the development teams with the vendors were experiencing challenges in meeting our standards for secure coding and meeting the timeline established for proper security assessment and mitigation. So what we did is that we added a prerequisite for the development team, part of that with the vendors, for them to run their own internal security assessment, make sure that all the critical, high, medium vulnerabilities were closed before coming into the Expo assessment cycle. This helped us a lot in shortening the time needed for the validation, maximize the number of reassessment, and also cutting the overall time required to deploy the application to the production environment. Don't forget, business requirement and timelines are very crucial to us. And we don't want security to be like a showstopper as well. But at the end, participant, visitors' data, and Expo's data infrastructure is crucial for us in terms of to maintain the security of it.
Oh, great. Appreciate that. And Manish, a similar question, but from a perspective that you're responsible for securing a large telco. And Eman mentioned that you do want to provide the security scanning, but you don't want to impact business operations. So from your perspective, how do you balance those two things, from providing the right assessment capability to balancing the needs of the business so you're not disrupting business operations?
Yeah, so Eric, as I mentioned, this whole process of risk assessment is a continuous process. I mean, it's formally done at regular intervals, whether it is a VAPT or it's a risk assessment, it's done at regular intervals, and we do it a little bit more frequently than than perhaps many others. In addition to that, you have multiple audits going on at some point in time. So the whole the team literally stays on its toes 365 days a year. Now, as far as finding the right balance is concerned, what does a business want? Business wants ease of use. Business wants that, and 95% of folks who are involved in business, they don't understand cybersecurity. Yes, there is a lot of effort, and I speak not from a telecom perspective. I think this is a general tendency, in all companies. And yes, companies do a lot of sensitization. They run awareness campaigns. They will do a once in a 3-month or once in a 6 months kind of a simulated phishing attack. Internally, all those exercises keep happening. But the fact of the matter is that 95% of the business basically uses IT systems for enabling and improving their business, and growing their business. Their focus is not really on cybersecurity. Their focus is not much as you would like them to, but you would like them to get sensitized, because they need to understand what are the risks if they don't at least take care of some of the basic parameters. So I think you need to have an open culture, but at the same time, you need to have very strong technologies put into place. I've seen companies where they allow access to critical systems on their mobile phones without having an MDM solution in place. Now that is asking for trouble. You don't need to monitor the entire device, but you do need to have a container in which you can give the access to your critical information for employees, and hence improve their productivity in a safer manner. And these technologies have been around for a very, very long time. Similarly, one of the other common mistakes which I actually see, a lot of companies do not have a DLP solution in place. They don't invest in one. But even those who invest in one, do not really take the time and effort to really fine tune this particular technology. And hence, either they have too many false positives, which drowns them out, or they have they probably haven't fine-tuned it to the extent that they're getting anything meaningful out of it. So they may be compliant from a regulatory perspective. That's a tick mark. Then that we have implemented DLP solution, but the fact is how effective it is. So if you are giving a company asset and you are giving the ability to an employee to be able to operate anytime, anywhere, give them anytime, anywhere access, you do need to be able to protect, company information. You need to have better protection for end devices, as of today, because a simple antivirus doesn't really work. You need a proper EDR solution for devices. So companies do have to invest. And even where they have invested, they need to really figure out whether are they getting the true worth of the money that they have invested. The other challenge in the field of cybersecurity is that there are lots of products which, unfortunately, what happens if you want a layered security, then you're looking at a large ecosystem of solutions. But I think when you have to implement these technologies, it is extremely important to see that how well integrated these can be done in your environment. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of technologies which are running well in their own isolated verticals, but there is no correlation actually happening, and you're not really able to exploit. You may be able to exploit an individual system by itself, but if you're not really able to correlate, then you miss out on a lot of intelligence that is garnered within your ecosystem. Now, this is an evolving field.
Oh, that's a great point.
Yeah, this is evolving even within the field of cybersecurity as we speak. So, which is why I keep saying that I think modern, current generation CISOs are not looking for products; they're looking for solutions.
Yep, we definitely see that as well. Everybody buys a lot of technology, but they don't necessarily have the right people to run it or the policies in place to effectively use it. So that's good insight. We do have a great question from the participants for Eman. Basically, what they would like to know is, given a organization like Expo and a number of visitors coming internationally, where you ultimately will have data from those international participants, how do you properly protect that data, especially given different international laws, GDPR in the UK, which covers European citizens? So how does Expo handle the, I guess, data privacy challenges with international participants, given a hodgepodge of different international laws and regulations around the world?
So that's a question that people keep asking us. So when the GDPR came into on the radar, we took that initiative and we did an assessment to understand, because as I mentioned earlier, we're expecting 70% of the visitors would be from outside the UAE. So we run an assessment against GDPR, and in order for our platforms and systems, whatever is even hosted outside in the cloud, outside of UAE, which are within the EU regulation, or even the customer's data or visitor participants' data. So we make sure of all of these infrastructures and the processes that we have are compliant with GDPR as well. But it's not only GDPR, it's other international data privacy regulation, and also UAE there are going to be announcements soon of a new data privacy regulation as well, which we're also looking forward for that, and how we're going to be able to make sure that we're compliant also with the local regulations as well. So part of that is identifying your assets. I mean, where's your organization asset within these boundaries and perimeters? How are you going to determine what jurisdictions, compliance, and regulations apply to that?
Great, thank you so much. Another question from our guest, for Manish. How are you dealing with the insider threat situation? Whether it's before the pandemic or if it's changed during the pandemic, how are you looking for insider threats? You mentioned DLP solutions. Are there other solutions that you found effective to properly identifying some of the insider threats that have, I guess, been across your entire organization?
Yeah, sure. So, Eric, I'm completing 3 years now. Very shortly, I'll finish 3 years in Airtel. One of the first things that I basically set about doing when I landed in the organization, of course, the first 3 months was simply learning because it's a very complicated environment. But once I started getting a feel of it, we started looking at ways of means of how do we transform the entire gambit of security operations. And we put a lot of effort in the DLP policies and to refine them further. And whilst I will confess, even as I found it when I took over, I think it was an absolutely amazing solution. The whole technology that was set up in Airtel was absolutely amazing. Very high standard, even as compared to some of the best in the implementations in the industry. We've only been trying to, raise that bar, increase the benchmark and raise the bar since then. We have a very, very effective DLP solution, one of the best in the country. Apart from there, I think user behavior is something which is extremely important. I would say this COVID crisis has, in many ways, I won't call it a blessing in disguise, but it's definitely not a blessing. But I would say it has taught us very, very important lessons. The first and foremost thing, it's basically tested you as an organization, as individuals, as professionals, and as organizations. It has actually brought out the best and pushed you to do even better than what you could have under normal circumstances. And what we could basically do is, create more use cases, do more analysis, bring in a little bit more of analytics to look at possibility of habitual offenders. So probably one minor incident, would get, and it's blocked, it gets probably gets unnoticed, but a chain of events, if they start actually happening, point out to something. So we have been using this time to see that, I'll be very frank, that there is no new technology. It is basically, the whole aspect of correlation of data, user behavior analytics. Now that you allow VPN connections remotely, VPN or VDI, connections remotely, you can make some use cases around that also. You immediately catch any attempts at credential sharing or whatever be this thing, and you suspend the account then and there itself. Now you don't look at an incident in isolation, you look at a series of incidents. So when you're doing user behavior analytics, it's not just one particular incident, but you do try to now analyze whether a person is a habitual offender, has this been done in the past? Eman mentioned analytics. So you create a database around that, and you have historical data to actually dive into, to do some analytics around this. So I would say that, this COVID crisis has taught us a lot of lessons. It has basically pushed us to improve our cybersecurity scenario, because the moment you're allowing a very large number of people to connect from outside, now operate from home, give access to very sensitive systems and at times data systems from remotely, then you have to do a much better job of monitoring. So it's just that we have all the necessary technologies in place, which are the normal, usual technologies which are available to any mature enterprise. I think the key is to be able to fine tune that to an absolutely unprecedented level.
No, I appreciate that. And that is often the challenge, is having enough time and capability to tune the technologies you have in place to really bubble up those critical offenders that you can then target for additional investigation. So appreciate that. We'll do one last question, simple yes or no for both of you. Have you seen the threats increase during this last 6-month period of time during the pandemic? Eman?
I would say yes.
Manish?
I would say yes too.
Okay, that was my assumption, and from what we've seen on our side, absolutely. There's definitely more targeting of home users, and as people work from home and different remote accesses get put in place, that obviously expands the landscape for attacks. So we have about 9 minutes left, so I want to afford both of you some final thoughts. So if you can kind of sum up your experience on this topic around large-scale enterprise infrastructure and how to protect those in 3 to 4 minutes. Eman, we'll start with you.
So just to summarize, and I'll quote some of the things also Manish mentioned, it's not only about the technologies that we deployed, it's also about fine-tuning in the use cases. And I think one of the challenges, since the concept of mega event is something new in the UAE and something new to most of us working in this region as well, how we're going to be able to move from the standard organization that we're working with, whether it was an industrial environment, telecom, and try to build security use cases in a mega event environment as well. So we tried to benchmark with previous mega events, and we tried to fine tune and come up with different use cases as well, which is designed for Expo Dubai 2020. I would say there are a lot of challenges that we faced as well with the different technologies that we used, as since some of the technologies were new technologies and it was new to most of us in terms of IoT and also some of the robots that were going to be used in Expo site as well. But it was, I think it is a good learning as well, and experience added on top of that, how we're going to be able to shift from the traditional security and a traditional organization into such a diverse environment, a small smart city within a city. And also on top of that, the regulations, you could see that regulations are changing, whether we have international regulations that are enforcing us. As Manish mentioned earlier as well, it's a small, the world become a very small connected city. So you can't just simply think if you're in X country, specific regulations are not applicable. International regulations, especially with all of these cloud providers, if you want to provide services and you want to reach to as much as customers and clients as possible, you need to leverage these new technologies, where I know people previously were saying no to cloud services or SaaS solutions due to security measures, but I think things changed a lot in the past couple of years. On top of that, with the meeting the local regulations as well.
Great, thanks, Eman. Manish, can we get some final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I agree with Eman. You know, she's spot on. The only thing what I would like to add is, you know, we talked about cloud technology. I have always been, and not because I did 4 years in Microsoft, but I have always been a believer in the power of the cloud, because I truly feel that it is hyper flexible, it is hyper scalable, and it is hyper secure. And the best part is that it allows organizations whose core business is not IT. It allows them to, you know, transform their operations very quickly. It's a pay-as-you-use kind of a model. And when it comes to security, most of the security gets encompassed in the secure cloud environment. What you have to worry about is largely the endpoint security and a very strong identity and access management. And that always remains the weakest link. The other thing that I would like to point out is that's a little bit more strategic, is that systems are getting more and more integrated. You know, today you have any company which works in a global environment connects to others, whether through secure APIs or whatever. It's very difficult for a company to thrive and stay isolated all by itself, and data exchanges actually happen. It's extremely important for organizations, particularly large enterprises, to be able to plan 3 years, to at least have a 3 years roadmap. And the reason why it is very important is because these are like super tankers. Taking a decision takes very long. Implementing procurement, even the aspect of deciding which technology is going to work for you takes pretty long. Then procurement and implementation of that takes pretty long. So you have to have a crystal ball kind of a effect here. You need to be able to look at least minimum 3 years in advance, and you have to be able to think forward. Because if the focus stays too much on today's technology or protecting your today, then I guess we will probably not be as effective for the next generation of cyber attacks, which will impact us tomorrow. So a certain amount, and that's what I keep telling my team. I said, guys, at least, if not significant, at least 10 to 15% of your time, your mind should be working about now what next, what's coming next. And hence that's the point I would like to make. Think at least, plan for at least 3 years.
Great. No, I appreciate that. I mean, just to kind of summarize the topic, obviously, it's a small world nowadays, and large organizations need to factor in the regulatory landscape globally, not just within a specific country. That technology is ever evolving, so being able to look at the right solutions that can provide you that enterprise visibility, enterprise risk, cyber risk management needs to be focused on. Obviously, the threat landscape is ever changing, so trying to understand it and work with it. Eman mentioned threat intelligence. I'm a big fan of understanding what the threat actors are doing, what their capabilities are, so you can be as proactive as possible to mitigate those threats. And then ultimately, it's about people, process, and technology working together in a cohesive unit across all the dispersed environments that you guys are responsible for managing, whether it's the cloud, IoT, OT, traditional IT environments, the mobile workforce, as well as applications. So in summary, we appreciate your time and your insight into this very challenging topic. I think everybody has gained a little bit more knowledge in how to tackle some of these challenges for their own organization. And we do appreciate your time today providing that insight. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll hand it over to Harshit to close us out.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Eri. Thank you all the speakers for this amazingly informative session. And it's always important to hear what are the discussion and challenges faced at the management level. Since we techies always feel that there is a gap between researcher and boardroom, but this is a really informative session. So thank you. We already have taken the questions. So thank you all the speakers and attendees. Stay safe, stay healthy. See you in the future events of nullcon. Thank you.
Thank you, Eman. Thank you, Eric. And thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.